In a midnight move, the president removed a sitting member of the National Labor Relations Board. No cause, no warning, no hearing. What followed? A constitutional showdown that could reshape how workplace rights are protected in America. This isn't just a political battle, it's about the future of your rights at work. So by the end of this video, you will understand how the National Labor Relations Board protects all employees, how this has placed workplace protections at risk, and why everyone, not just union workers, should care. Hi, I'm Harlow Reed, employment lawyer. Is weakened, those rights disappear too, which means less power to speak up and fewer legal remedies when workers face things like retaliation or unfair treatment. That's why cases like this are so important. Okay, let's talk about it. The content shared on this channel is for informational purposes only and shouldn't be taken as legal advice. Always consult a qualified attorney or HR professional for guidance on your specific situation. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. On January 27th, 2025, just after midnight, a sitting board member, Gwynne Wilcox, was removed by President Trump. No misconduct, no hearing, just removed. Now, Gwynne Wilcox is a labor attorney with decades of experience. She is a true champion for workers' rights, and in 2021, she became the first Black woman appointed to the NLRB. She served as a stabilizing presence in what was at the time a fiercely divided agency. She is well known for issuing worker friendly rulings, and the removal of her from the NLRB, well, that had never happened before in NLRB history. Why does that matter? Because the National Labor Relations Act says members can only be removed for malfeasance or neglect of duty, and only after a hearing. This wasn't just an HR issue, it shook the foundation of an agency that is meant to function independently. So, as I said, this had never happened in the 90-year history of the NLRB. So, what do you think Wilcox did next? Wilcox sued. Her legal team pointed to the Supreme Court's 1935 ruling in Humphreys v. United States. And this was a big case, guys, because it limited the president's power to remove officials from independent federal agencies. In other words, presidents can't just fire members of independent federal agencies on a whim. And how did President Trump respond? Well, he didn't deny the statute, he challenged its constitutionality. He said it's unlawful to restrict executive authority to that degree. He also argued that presidents need more control over federal boards, even those created to be neutral. And the courts were divided. One judge said the removal was likely legal under modern interpretations, and then another judge called it unprecedented and dangerous. I'll save you the full legal ping pong match, but here's the short version. A federal judge ordered that Wilcox be reinstated, but that victory was short lived because the administration immediately appealed to the Supreme Court. And just like that, Wilcox was out again. Chief Justice John Roberts issued an emergency stay blocking Wilcox's return. He said absolutely nothing in the order, but legal experts, they are beginning to pick up on a pattern because Roberts had already authored rulings that expand executive power. And this move, many believe, signals the court's intent to make it easier for presidents to control independent agencies. And now, with one seat vacant, the NLRB is down to just two members. That's one short of a quorum. And without a quorum, the board can't make decisions. It can't rule on union elections. It can't enforce rulings or unfair labor practices. That means workers with pending cases, they're in limbo. And labor rights right now, guys, they are on pause, on hold. Nothing is happening. Now, even without a quorum, the board still has influence. The general counsel, who serves as the internal prosecutor for the National Labor Relations Board, that position can decide which cases to pursue. But the difference is the prior administration, they targeted anti-worker rulings from the past. But now that agenda is shifting. Several pro employer rulings are no longer being challenged, so the tide is turning. That means that workers may find it harder to speak out, to unionize, or even hold employers accountable. So, where do things stand today? Well, the Supreme Court has issued an emergency stay, which blocked Gwynne Wilcox's return to the NLRB for now. They haven't ruled on whether her removal was legal. Instead, the case is going back to the DC Circuit for a full review. So, the DC court will now conduct a full review of the case, and depending on how they rule, the matter could return to the Supreme Court, where a final decision might redefine the structure of America's independent agencies. So, I want to take a quick moment just to name a few of these independent federal agencies because once you hear them, I think it drives home what is at stake here in this ruling. We are talking about, of course, the National Labor Relations Board, which handles workplace disputes that affects every worker in the US, but we are also talking about the Federal Trade Commission, which protects consumers, the SEC, which keeps the stock market in check, the FCC, which regulates what you see and what you hear on TV, on the internet, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which makes sure the products we use every day are actually safe. Then there are financial agencies as well, like the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the civil rights agencies like the EEOC, the environmental agencies like the EPA, nuclear safety regulators like the NRC. These agencies were designed to operate independently. That means they make decisions based on law, based on facts, and their expertise, their training, their knowledge, not on political pressure from whomever happens to be in the White House. If we allow presidents to remove these leaders at will, it opens the door to instability, favoritism, and a total breakdown of the trust in how these vital functions are carried out. So, really, agency independence isn't just a technical rule, it's what protects fairness, consistency, and the integrity of the decisions that affect all of us. If the court ultimately sides with Trump, it could gut long-standing protections for agency independence and expand presidential control over bodies like the National Labor Relations Board. In the meantime, the NLRB doesn't have enough members to make decisions, and again, without a quorum, it's frozen. And new nominations are reportedly on the way, but until they are confirmed, millions of workers are left without an active labor board at a time when protections are already under pressure. This case is about much more than legal technicalities. It's about whether the federal agency created to protect your rights can even do its job. It's about whether presidents, any president, can sideline worker protections with a signature. If the NLRB can be dismantled this easily, what happens to the rest of our workplace rights? This case isn't just about politics, it's about whether working people still have a voice. If you care about fair treatment at work, if you believe in the right to organize, subscribe to the HR Insider. We break down the real impact of legal decisions on real people with new videos every week. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you in the next video.